Bigger than a hell ring, things like you heard on the decks. Glover hold the court and give the chief no suspect. Politics in the mix, like Gumbo Stewart Rich. Spinning tales from Black Wall Street, real life's the pitch. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news.
Welcome to BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth. How you doing, man?
Man, feeling well, man.
What's your name?
My name is Cardi Cornish.
And you a legend?
I'm a legend.
You're a legend here in Baltimore City. Where we at right now?
We live in the 17, Pennsylvania Avenue. The legendary Pennsylvania Avenue.
Man, the last time I saw you here, you were doing something just across the street here. What were you doing?
Oh yeah, I had some food left over from an event. We brung it out and fed a couple of people, man.
Why you do that?
Nice soul food.
Why you do that?
Man, the love that God has shown me in Christ, man, it overflows. That's how it overflows.
That's right.
We got more than we can use. We got more than we can handle ourselves and try to let it flow. Let it go to the next bit.
Yeah. We're proud of you, man.
Thank you.
And we're proud of your son.
Thank you.
You're watching BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth.
Business tips hotter than lava. Got that Midas touch. Stocks and blocks teaching youngins how to clutch. Ears to the concrete, finger on the pulse, dropping wisdom like Hova. Each word a joke. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. 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 Walls painted black, history on lock. Blast off from Tulsa, rebirth like a clock. Markets rising from ashes to gains. Donnie the narrator, truth runs in veins. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news.
Top of the morning to you. First name's Donnie, last name's Glover, in it to win it for the long haul, baby. Today's guest, Dr. Jared Ball, professor of Communication and Africana Studies at Morgan State University, hashtag national treasure, author of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. And he's also the host of the podcast, iMiXWHATiLiKE. He can be found at iMiXWHATiLiKE on most social media, and his decades of emancipatory journalism, media, writing, and political work can be found at iMiXWHATiLiKE.org. The one and only Professor Jared Ball. Good morning, sir. How are you? I can't hear you. There we go.
Yeah, I don't know. Everything's working over here.
Yes, we're good.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm as good as could be expected. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, we got some questions for you.
Okay.
All right. Who's your favorite rapper?
My quick answer would be Pharoah Monch. Skip Coon is right behind him, if not next to him, and Maimouna Yusuf.
Moo Fresh.
Moo Fresh, no question.
What's your hometown?
I was born in D.C., raised out here in Columbia, Maryland, for the most part.
Who was the best mayor of Washington, D.C.?
The best mayor of Washington, D.C., given the context of that question, I mean, it would have to be the only mayor, my mayor, Marion Barry.
We good to go then. We good to go. He took my phone calls.
Yeah.
Servant leader.
Yeah.
And you'll never guess where I had to interview him one time. Strip club.
So it's funny you said that. When I taught high school briefly in Southwest DC, and one day my partner and I took a lunch break and walked across the street, to one of those local fine establishments, and right there at lunchtime, with at least one, I think two women on his lap, was Mayor Barry.
Yeah, and
So
he knew my name.
And he was set up for all of his flaws. He
Absolutely.
was in fact set up. So
having someone who has been in that world of addiction, I can tell you, you do not have to tell a drug addict to hit that pipe.
No, and I've shared my own experiences once upon a time. I'm very sympathetic to that struggle, and I think anyone who has ever experienced any of those substances would have to acknowledge that it's a difficult thing to overcome, and more power to anybody who does.
So I was watching the interview of you on Red Nation, and one of the things you talked about, I did not know that you were a journalism major. That's what your PhD is in.
So yeah. So I went to undergrad at Frostburg State in Western Maryland, whereas I like to remind people I was the drummer for the greatest funk band in Western Maryland between 1997 and 1999, which is Mama's Biscuits, and where I studied history and African American studies. Then I went to the great Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell University under the leadership of the founding director, the late great Dr. James Turner. And then I got a PhD in journalism and communication. I think the exact title is Journalism and Public Communication, on its way to media studies at the University of Maryland. So
I'm looking at University of Maryland now for a PhD program for myself. I tell you someone I did meet on that campus years ago, and I'm sure you can appreciate it, Manning Marable.
So yeah, I never had the pleasure of meeting him personally, but certainly appreciate most of his work. Though I have been, involved in some very public criticism of the final book attributed to him on Malcolm X. But that book notwithstanding, Manning Marable was for sure a towering giant, and made a great many contributions to the study of just history, but also, of course, Black people in particular.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall Jesse McDade Bay?
Of course, I used to listen to the Spear, right? No.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? Nah, man, forgive my memory, but I used to listen to a show, and particularly I picked him up. I might have been late to the party in the very early 1990s when I was delivering pizza. I used to listen to his was one of the shows I used to make sure to check, and then had the pleasure of meeting him and was a guest on his show at one point before he passed. So yeah.
He was probably the first person I heard speak about socialism. I really had no idea about it, but all I did know that when he came on WEAA, it was going to be something special. He was going to say some provocative things. Thank God for WEAA. Any thoughts on and that goes into the interview with Red Nation, the significance of Black media. I came out with a book, Journalpreneur, and I learned some things. I gotta share them with you. But any thoughts on the history of journalism as it relates to our community, the significance of it?
Well, it's been extremely significant, and that's why it's also been a place, sort of a battleground of great contestation over who gets to tell what stories and how. But the Black press and underground and unsanctioned communication among African people in this country has been essential, and been a mechanism of making sure that enslaved and colonized and oppressed communities, Black communities, would have access to information and frames on information that were not coming from the mainstream. So this was, yeah. So, I mean, it's always been a key point, and it's always played a role in the liberation struggles of Black people. Almost every major organization had its own media arm, its own publication, and that's been essential. And one of the contradictions that I'm sure we'll end up talking a little bit about that we find ourselves in today is that so much of those spaces have been corrupted by the need to chase ad revenue, which inextricably is connected to white corporations and elite politics. And that has a negative impact on the kinds of media and journalism that we all get, and has a particularly negative impact on Black communities. So, but yeah, it's always been vital.
In this world of social media, have you ever been blocked?
Oh yeah, of course. I've been blocked. I block people
by the social media outlet itself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not fully blocked. I've had things flagged. We've had our Black Liberation Media YouTube channel demonetized. So yeah, I mean, we have had some direct engagement with, negative, but I personally have not been fully blocked by any.
One day I woke up, I had a Facebook page with 211,000 followers, and it was gone. And I hadn't said anything hateful, derogatory, violent. As a matter of fact, the last comment I remember making on the page had to do with a comment. I was responding to a comment about Black Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you buy the storyline, the narrative, the American narrative that Black people were primarily brought to America? Black people came to America by force in the bottom of a slave ship.
Well, I'm not aware of this as how you describe it as a quote unquote American narrative. I understand this is part of the history of African people. And the history of African people in this country did not fully start with enslavement. I'm aware of at least some arguments and histories around African people being to this part of the world prior to the transatlantic trade. But primarily, the African experience is connected here to enslavement and colonization.
So have you ever
with only 5% of it happening here in the United States, by the way.
Have you ever come across the story of Blacks being taken from North America and shipped, enslaved to Europe?
I'm aware that there were some enslaved Africans carried back to Europe, but primarily for various purposes, but primarily the practice involved bringing Africans from the continent to the settler colonial spaces of European empires. So it would not have made sense to be bringing en masse Africans enslaved into Europe to do what? To work what? The reason Europeans left Europe in the first place was because they had no crops. They had no natural resources. They had no spices. They had no sugar. So to develop all of that, as Cecil Rhodes, the great, and by great, I mean massively impactful, not decent or, he's really among one of the worst human beings to have ever walked the earth and gets a lot of passage. But Cecil Rhodes said himself that we have to get Europeans out of Europe for the survival of Europe. It's overcrowded. We don't have the space for them. We don't have the room. We don't have the need for their labor. So we need to send them out and to create and expand the British Empire. So the, aside from what would have to be a handful of relatively, relatively speaking, small amounts, most Africans were forced off the continent and into the Caribbean and North America.
I struggle with that. I struggle. Well, I look at Brazil. We have 44 million black people in the U.S., 100 million black people in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And it's just hard to fathom that many people were put on a ship to go somewhere.
Well, the way you describe it would maybe be confusing. It's not that many people were put on a ship. We're talking about something that took place over several hundreds of years. And as I said, 95% of the enslaved Africans taken from the continent were deposited in Central and South America and the Caribbean, with only 5% making it to North America. So it makes perfect sense that we would now have a situation where Brazil would be the largest, or I believe the largest, black population off the continent, because it has a huge land base, a lot of land that needed to be worked, a lot of resources to be extracted, and a lot of difficult conditions to survive, meaning that there would have been a greater need to continue to import. And if you go back and if folks ever read any of the histories of enslavement, depending on what period you're talking about, but particularly at the beginning, the idea was work them till they die and then go get more. So it wasn't preserve, establish survivable conditions so that they could work longer and procreate and produce more, and so on and so on. It was work them till they die and just go grab some more. So it makes perfect sense to me that you would have a situation where Brazil would have this many Africans. And as would be the case if you go anywhere throughout Central and South America, that's what you find. And that's, again, why, working backwards from that, the largest Pan-African movement in the history of the world, the Garvey movement, started with Garvey beginning in Jamaica, going throughout the Caribbean, Central and South America, and seeing how many African people were there, and seeing how there was a continuity of treatment and conditions, leading him to the conclusion that there needed to be a universal Negro Improvement Association that would unite all of the African world and reclaim the continent from which all of these people, or most of these people, had been dragged.
When I was researching the last book, Journalpreneur, I learned something I didn't know. As an American, as one who speaks primarily English, I have been under the mindset that the black press started in America.
And
March 16th, 1827, first black newspaper, New York City, Freedom's Journal. Well, you could throw in David Walker's Appeal, of course. But it was not
later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was not the first. The first black newspaper, according to my research, was around 1800 in Sierra Leone. And this was built by, of course, that's where they sent British expatriates from Nova Scotia back to the continent, Sierra Leone. And then the second black newspaper I found was in Haiti. First, Jean-Jacques Dessalines had one, and then Henry Christophe had one. So America, according to what I think I found, was Freedom's Journal was like the third black newspaper. And again, it was from a mindset of, I'm black, I'm American, I speak English. But then I had to remember, we weren't just speaking English. We spoke Spanish, Portuguese, French, and as well as our indigenous tongues.
Yeah, no. So I'm not as familiar with that history as you are, and I think it points to another flaw in the U.S. dominated academic spaces that through which I spent some time coming through, and we often were taught to start the tradition of the black press with Cornish and Russworm, who, of course, I only just recently learned ended up having their split be be they broke, the two of them broke their partnership within just a few months. And I can't remember who said what, but I think it was, yeah, I can't remember whose side each was on, but the beef was over repatriation. So, and one of them said we got to go back to Africa, and the other one said we got to stay here and continue the struggle. And that beef and argument continues to this day.
There's a man here in Baltimore, former delegate Clarence Tiger Davis. You may have bumped into him as a professor at Morgan.
Not personally, just vaguely aware, but yeah.
He taught me about this soldier, patriot named James Fortin, who was in Philadelphia, and free man, eventually bought a ship sail company. But the beef was between, now he believed in, we built America, we stay here, we fought for it, blah, blah, blah. His son was with those guys about going back to Africa. And I've concluded, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, that maybe they both were right.
Yeah, I'm not mad at either. And first of all, I completely understand, even to this day, but certainly then, I understand the contradictions. You know, I mean, the idea, regardless of what people might understand to be the Black or African contribution to the development of the United States, the peace, brother Chris, the you know, whatever people might think about that, the relationship Black people have to this country has never been great. So it makes sense that there would always be a group that would be thinking, let's go back or let's go somewhere else. And there would be a group that would say, let's stay here and make this work. We don't see any other choice. So I get it. And as Dr. John Henrik Clarke used to say about the argument between, you know, Du Bois, Booker T, and Garvey, we needed them all. We, you know, and more. We needed the ideas, and we need the ideas of everyone as we figure things out. I would also just say that there are reactionary and radical ways of addressing these differences. So there's a progressive internationalism, a radical Black revolutionary nationalism and internationalism that would recognize that Black people here, African people here, are part of an African diaspora and need to move as such. And there are those who would take the very reactionary, I think, conservative view that Black people here are exclusively connected to the United States and should operate on that basis. And I think at best, I mean, at minimum, I would say that's tactically a flaw. But I understand, I can intellectually, you know, I can appreciate even why different people would come to these different conclusions. I just think that they're not, I just, you know, don't always agree with those conclusions. That's all.
Do you think we'll ever build our own media separate from America? I mean, YouTube, Google, these entities are pretty powerful. As you know, Malcolm said the most powerful entity in the world is the media. Can make the innocent look guilty, the guilty look innocent. Do you think we'll ever own and control our own?
I think there are media that are owned and controlled by Black people. I think that in the context of this media environment in this country's political economy, that ownership means, to me, very little. The idea theoretically is that this separate ownership would produce a different content, a different worldview, a different analysis. And for some of us, it might mean even having a revolutionary analysis to go with it. And that's not often what we get. And you can't have that in this currently formed media and political economy structure. You can't have an independently owned and revolutionary media that is viable and sustainable. So I think that there are a number of efforts to have that form of Black autonomy and ownership, but I think that is limited as a goal and limited in its potential to do good work. So I think I'm always advocating that we support underground and even unsanctioned forms of media and communication, that we engage these sanctioned forms like YouTube very differently, and that we organize for political power that looks to better redistribute the wealth we're all already participating in creating. And I don't, and even, you know, the to Michael's Root Randolph's comment, building our own with Web3, I'm not convinced. In fact, quite the opposite. I don't see that as a viable. I don't see, because see, this is one of the, and this is where I often find myself in disagreement. New technology and advances in technology don't change the political economy, and they don't change social relationships. They enhance them. So the idea that some new form of technology will somehow allow for a greater freedom among already oppressed people it's not supported by data or history. So I think the extent to which we do attempt to build our own, and I'm not mad at people trying to do it, I think there needs to be as much effort put towards, again, an above board effort to accumulate more of what is already being produced in terms of wealth and media space and everything else. But yeah,
Is it safe to conclude that AI is innately racist?
Well, yeah, because AI is simply a reflection of the existing society's thought. It's not some independent and distinct thinking entity. It is just a quick acting collection of the thought that already exists and dominates a society. And we live in a white supremacist, anti-Black capitalist world. So it's going to reflect the same thing.
What was the first book that inspired you?
Malcolm's autobiography.
How long did it take you to read it?
The first time was very quick because I was on a mission. And I wanted to make sure I read it before Spike Lee's movie came out. And I was also in the Navy and out at sea a lot. So there was a lot of time for me to do that. And so, yeah, I don't remember exactly how long, but it took very little time. And then I quickly devoured everything else from Malcolm and about him that I could put my hands on. And that was it.
Why did he resonate with you?
I mean, I think, I often joke, I mean, I am mixed, but in this instance, I had a stereotypically Black male experience that, for a lot of us, reading Malcolm's autobiography helped us understand our own changes politically and intellectually, and how we saw the world, how we were, it's obviously not a perfect comparison, but I definitely even then equated how I ended up in the military and my military experience with being incarcerated. And to this day, I refer to it as a sentence. And so reading about his transformation in prison, I figured, well, if he can do that in a real prison, I can definitely make some similar strides in this form of a prison, that is the Navy. And so, yeah, that's, but I think I think that's basically it. And and his vibe, even in that autobiography, which by now I've come to realize is more of a manicured, softened political document. But even in that, the vibe was to become hostile to this society, and that worked for me. I am hostile to this society. I don't like it. I don't like how it operates. I don't like its impact, particularly on Black and brown people. I don't like and poor people. So he helped give me a way of interpreting that and directing that energy.
Could you see yourself living in another country?
Yeah, I mean, I married a Panamanian, so it may happen just by circumstance at some point. And I've traveled enough in the world to know that you know, my jokes are inappropriate sometimes, but basically all I need is air conditioning, electricity, and I used and yeah, the internet and air conditioning, and I used to say and a good, and a good plug, and you could put me anywhere. I'm good anywhere. But yeah. So yeah, I could, and maybe one day we'll see.
Does any inspiration come to you from the jazz era? I'm thinking, before there was hip hop, we had a whole cadre of famous jazz artists. Miles comes to mind, Pharoah Sanders, long list. I mean, you listen to WEAA. In any of those early jazz artists inspire your work today?
Yeah, and no disrespect to WEAA, but I came up with and worked for a long time with WPFW 89.3 FM in DC and Pacifica's jazz station, and or black classical music, as my godfather and others would call it. But so I got a serious education working there, and I'm but I'm also, you mentioned hip hop. I'm also a hip hop head and from that generation. And I'm from the generation where liner notes used to mean something. And I used to read liner notes and learn about what was being sampled in my favorite songs. So that's how I got introduced to a lot of great jazz. Of course, Jazzmatazz with Guru and all of that. And, those kinds of albums. But yeah, that's how, and then working at WPFW, I was definitely exposed. Yeah, Mr. Tom Porter, absolutely. That's my godfather, and who was quoting there a minute ago. And so yeah, we jazz is I think essential, and its history very important, and its manipulation and understanding some of that is very important as well. And I don't know if we arrange this. I just want to give a heads up that I just, for today, I do have to be out of here at 10 o'clock. I have but I just want to make sure that was, understood. And then, but I'm always happy to come back, of course.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, so yeah. But jazz is been very, important, and understanding its history and a little bit more, over the years has been very important and helpful.
I got to take you back to the beginning of American journalism, at least my understanding, because I'm getting, maybe this is a precursor for the next interview. I just want to get an understanding. The first piece of journalism, if you will, that our professor taught us at Coppin State, Ron Nichols. He taught it the first day of class. He had us watch The Birth of a Nation.
Interesting. As journalism, as a piece of journalism in particular,
media.
Yeah.
To know what we were up against. He felt that film would set the record.
Well, to this day, first of all, for those who study film, apparently to this day, it's considered, just technologically, before people get into the politics, it's considered a seminal, groundbreaking film. But D.W. Griffiths was a white supremacist and a settler colonial, champion, and put all of that into the film, all of those politics into the film. And so I understand, in terms of what Professor Nichols was saying, that this is what you're up against, that you're up against a media, as I would describe it, a media environment that has only ever been created to serve a military and settler colonial purpose. All this other stuff about entertainment and advertising and business and whatever is at best secondary to that foundational purpose. So the point of media is to convey the rightfulness and the justification for this military project, and for its ongoing protected functioning. So using that film, which in many ways launched the modern media era, makes sense. And it also makes sense to note that from the very beginning, people, including Booker T. Washington, were even involved. Somebody is whatever we think of him politically, there was an immediate attempt to respond. And I think they were even at one point trying to develop a film that was going to be the Black response called Birth of a Race. But it didn't, it didn't make it to fruition. So yeah, it, of course, was put into operation by Woodrow Wilson as president. It was used to galvanize the white national spirit and to let everybody know that these so-called newfound freedoms for Black people were to be struggled against forever.
Are you inspired when you hear about Ibrahim Traore?
Absolutely. And I don't pretend to have all the facts right, but you would just ask if I was inspired, and absolutely. And to the extent he's bringing back that idea of Thomas Sankara and an anti-Western Pan-Africanism, I'm with that, and I hope that to the extent I understand what's happening, that he is successful and his comrades are successful, and that it leads to something continent-wide and diaspora-wide.
Did you ever run across the Last Poets in your musical journey?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of not only being a fan of the art, but working. We had. Oh my goodness, my memory.
Suleiman?
No, the other brother. Oh my goodness. Anyway, he was in when I was working with the Real News briefly in Baltimore 10 years ago, and
really,
yeah, briefly. And
the Last Poet guy was here.
Yeah, and he was in our and we had him. He was part of our video mixtape tribute to George Jackson, where he performed in part, niggas is scared of revolution.
Yes, that's the one.
And so I've had the fortune of working with and meeting and at least a little bit, and of course just appreciating their contributions and
Abiodun Owali.
Abiodun, that's it.
Abiodun Owali.
Wait. Now I'm confusing myself. Hold on a second.
Umar bin Hassan.
Yeah, I think it was Umar bin Hassan. That's who it was. My bad. My apologies, everybody. This is it was Umar bin Hassan, not Abiodun.
So then I gotta test your knowledge. I learned that we had the Last Poets on the East Coast. Now I've never really heard their music, but I understand on the West Coast they had the Watts Prophets.
Now, so I did. Not only am I familiar with the Watts Prophets, but now I got to look up my brother's name because I met. And oh man, so not only am I familiar with them, but I met. This would have been in 2008. And it's interesting because it involves. You asked me a while ago who's my favorite rapper, and I said Pharoah Monch. Amde Hamilton, that's who I met. And Pharoah Monch did a remix of, oh man, my memory is trash. He did a remix, he did a track called Pain, where he remixed the Watts Prophets poem Pain. He took a clip where you hear Amde reciting this, powerful poem, and then Pharaoh comes in. Never I feel so much pain, the pain of a million slave ships. Oh, the pain of a million slaves in chains. Oh, I can't remember how. Oh man, never have I felt so much pain, the pain of a million slaves. Oh man, but Pharaoh killed it. And so when I was on this trip and I met Amde, I played it for him, and I said, what do you think of this? I was like, this is a tribute. And he didn't like it. He didn't appreciate it. And I felt terrible because I was so excited and enthusiastic. And so I've had the pleasure of meeting, passing through. It didn't go, it wasn't, the perfect experience I was hoping for, and I didn't mean to offend him. And I know Pharaoh didn't mean to offend him, but we don't always appreciate how things go.
Brother
But I
Chris,
do think, but people should check out that track. You can find it online. Pharaoh Monch's Pain. It's amazing, and you hear some of the Watts prophets.
Okay, so let's go with Brother Chris. He's inquiring about your book, and it's certainly has some reviews. The Myth of Black Buying Power. You're saying the $2 trillion in disposable annual disposable income in the Black community. While that's important, it's not everything. That's what
I'm saying it's not real, and it's in fact anti-Black propaganda. But I want to start with what even you just said there. You said something about it has some reviews. And the fact is that's not true. There's as I'm aware, there's only been one published review from someone who's actually read the book. And
bad choice of words. There are some
No, but I think this is important. I'm not mad. I'm glad you said it that way, because I think this is important. And I think it's important because not only is it just the one, but it's from a white scholar who had nothing but positive to say about it. What unfortunately has been happening too much is Black pundits, commentators, and critics do not read the book and then go publicly and say things about it, about what they think the argument is and what they think I'm saying.
Oh, that's not
and that has become so. I'm inviting people to, at minimum, get the first edition, which is still for free. You can get the digital copy for free and see. But essentially what I'm arguing is that what we are told is this Black buying power, as you pointed out, that's headed towards $2 trillion at some point. It not only does it exist, but that if it were used with greater degrees of financial literacy, Black people could better improve their conditions in this country. And what I'm saying is that first of all, that's wrong, and that the buying power claim is something that has emerged over time, coming out of the business and political elite as a measurement of how much they can expect to exploit from working people, and most specifically, how they can target their ad revenue. It has nothing to do with income, wealth. It has nothing to do with what could actually be invested or pooled. It is, as is often ignored, what are called, quote, estimates and projections, coming from usually just one source, which is part of the argument that I'm trying to show. Like we're getting, in other words, we're taking ad data, revenue marketing data, and claims that are meant to help the business community, and having them projected to Black audiences as actual financial and economic power. And that's not, and then of course it works to convince many people that Black people are poor because Black people are financially illiterate. Black people don't know how to invest. Black people don't support one another. And it just blames Black people for their inequality. And that's factually incorrect. It's just not how poverty works. And it's not how wealth is accumulated. That is through buying power. So
what's the solution?
I mean, my solution is radical political organization, unsanctioned media and communication, and then in terms of above board politics, advocating for a redistribution of the wealth that is already created. So part of what I'm saying is, instead of people focusing on this mythology around 2 trillion or whatever in black buying power, there should be a focus on the real wealth that's created in this society, the $20 trillion in gross domestic product, the $6 trillion that is accumulated in the hands of about 800 Americans. And all of that wealth comes from all of our economic activity. This country is a 70% consumer-based economy. So instead of telling people to stop spending ignorantly, people, if you stop buying this and shopping over here and spending your money, instead of telling people that, they should be told, continue to spend and demand more from the wealth that expense creates. Instead of it all going to 1% of the population that own everything, that wealth should be redistributed via healthcare and education and housing and better incomes and employment, et cetera, and so forth. That's what we should be advocating.
Big brother, demanded from whom? And I go back to when I was a kid, first moved from East Baltimore to West Baltimore. There were 2 kids at the end of the block, and I had to go past their house to go to the store. And there were times I avoided that by any and every means necessary, even if it means going down the alley, until one day, about 5 years into the scenario, I ended up fighting both brothers. And that was the only way that was going to end. We tried Kumbaya, we tried Jesus, we tried turning the other cheek. The only thing I found in East Baltimore and West Baltimore that a bully understands is an alley apple upside the head.
So I love the analogy, but I would not be disrespectful to you or to your platform to come on here and advocate violence. So what I advocate publicly and overtly is that fight that you're talking about take place politically, and that the political fight be the bully at the end of the corner blocking our way to the corner store is the ruling elite and their legislation that through public policy redistributes all this wealth to the top 1%. And I'm saying, get the alley apple, get the whatever, and let's swing on some of this public policy and say, you all wrote this legislation. People we've elected, people who claim to be representing us, you all have written this legislation so that all the tax breaks, all the incentives, all the wealth, all the investment opportunities, all the capital, all the whatever goes to 1% and really less than 1% of the population. All of that can be reversed through public policy. So instead of telling us to circulate our dollars and organize ourselves in our own business communities and our own poor neighborhoods, we should be telling each other, let's organize ourselves per political movement. Go buy your hair, go buy your rims, go get your hair done, go get that $20 latte. You got money, you worked all week, go to the movies. That's what creates the wealth in this society. Then the public policy should say, oh, that wealth comes back to the people. And you get your roads paved, you get your schools fixed. Why, if we even start with the microcosm of Maryland, why should Baltimore, every year since I was a kid, even growing up in Howard County, the benefit I used to say of growing up in Columbia, Maryland, is that I used to get the local news broadcasts of both DC and Baltimore on my little 5-channel antenna, black and white, turn with the wrench TV. We got, and watching that, even from out here in the suburbs, every single year of my entire life up until 2025, we get reports about this school is shutting down because it's too hot in the summer. This school can't open because it's too cold in the winter. And yet every year we're told that we're supposed to do something else. We've already done it. When we go to work and pay our bills, when we pay our taxes, when we buy our lattes and go to the movies and go to the mall and shop, We are creating all of the wealth just in terms of the state of Maryland that should be redistributed in such a way that none of this is even a possibility, never mind an annual reality. That's what I'm saying. So what my argument around buying power is saying is that the mythology works to get us to focus on what can never solve a problem and then blame ourselves as if we're poor because we don't know how to save money. That's not how any group of people has ever been made poor, and no community that is rich ever got rich because they have some superhuman understanding of the economy. They got rich because they had benefits nobody had, and they did things to exploit and take advantage of other people that most of us wouldn't do. So I'm just saying, stop. So I'm not going to tell you. No. We should really, going back to your analogy, we should have a movement that organizes the community and invites the bully to just step aside without any need for you to by yourself have to fight two of them to get into the store. But we're told every day, the mythology says, nah, no, Donnie, no, Jared, you go walk yourselves down there by yourself and fight them on your own. That's what the Black community is being told when we're constantly being told to support our businesses and circulate $1 and have greater financial literacy and all that. We're being told, no, you just walk to the corner and by yourselves with no weapons and no training and nothing, and just go fight them. And if you can make it in, great. And we'll hold you up and say you're the great Black success story. But most of you are going to get your head cracked open, and most of you are going to get left in the alleyway. And then we're going to turn around and blame you for it. That's why I can't. That's what I'm saying. That's really what I'm trying to say with the myth.
Who do we follow? We criticize Barack. He was either too Black or not Black enough. We got Westmore, who's seemingly following, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like he's following a similar model to the White House.
Yeah.
Is it that way? Marion Barry, for all he did, he got demonized. Maynard Jackson, for all he did, they chased him out of Atlanta.
So just using the Barry example, one of the things that made Barry effective is that he was someone who had been elevated out of a pre-existing Black liberation struggle. He had been in SNCC. He had been in part of a movement that propelled him into office with certain expectations. And for all of his flaws, a lot of that was met, or it was attempted to be met. So what I'm saying is we have to become more active and more involved at a grassroots level in producing those candidates the way Mayor Barry and others were produced themselves. We can't keep waiting for a Westmore to basically seemingly come out of nowhere. I don't know what your information and resources are, but most people don't seem to know much about him, don't know, where he comes out of. I know because I was very much involved with this. Shout out to the late, great Glenn Ford and Bruce Dixon, the Black Agenda Report for this. But because of that, my working with them at the time, I was very much aware of how little people knew about Barack Obama. Nobody knew who he was. That's why he lost his first race against Fred Hampton's former partner. What's his name? Now I can't remember anybody's name today. But the point is that what I'm saying is we should be working with the Ujima People's Party for Progress Party here in Maryland. We should be supporting the Black Alliance for Peace. We should be supporting community movement builders. We should be supporting the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We should be developing the Green Party, for instance. I'm talking about Maryland. I'm supporting Andy Ellis for governor in 26. So, but my point is we should be involved in producing the candidates, the parties, the platforms, and then sending them to say, now go represent these interests for us, instead of saying, let's wait for the blackest one we can get to be handed down to us. And then try to figure out on the fly, are they Black enough? Are they not Black enough? And then do we support? Well, we got to support it because it's Black. We can't, no. Let's be involved let's get ourselves involved in the process. That would be, yeah.
I know we only have a couple of minutes, so I got to get this one political question in. Here in Baltimore, some years ago, Senator Lisa Gladden won the state senatorship in the 41st district. She then passed the ball to, I guess it was it Jill Carter? Yeah, Jill Carter. Now, most recently, 41st District, Northwest Baltimore, Evanston Village on the west, all the way up to Pimlico north. Jill was appointed to a board by the governor. The senatorial seat was left open. The same seat that Lisa Gladden busted her butt to get. And then two black women, Angela Gibson, I almost called her Angela Goldberg because that's what they say on the streets. Angela Gibson and Lakeisha Brown Wright Eel, a Moorish Muslim, voted for the lady Dahlia Attar over, and she's not an African-American, over the African-American Malcolm Ruff. So my question is, how do we preserve what hard-fought battles we've won when we have a whole new generation that comes in that knows nothing about the history?
I don't have a good answer for that, other than to say we have to be more involved in.
I mean, it's a majority black district. It was just like, boom, all you just do it and it makes it happen. It's like we get into power and we're chained by fear, or is it lack of organization?
Part of it is a lack of organization. Part of it is, as I was saying a moment ago, that a lot of the politicians who get elected don't have a strong, militant, progressive, and active base pushing them to maintain a certain standard, and they're being elected along sort of the same traditional way means. And then even if you're well-meaning, once you get in there, it's very difficult on your own to stand on any sort of principle or to push through any sort of legislation, especially when you know you don't have a lot of support, not only from the people you're trying to get to sign these bills, your colleagues in the legislature, but you don't have significant support from the people in the streets and in the community. And that's ultimately, and that's going back to my initial point, that the people in the community have to be more involved in producing the candidates, and that will help, I think, solve this issue. But but it is too easy. You know, I keep, I know we don't have time, but I keep, like, we're in a world where people are saying, LeBron James and Kevin Durant just said Wilt Chamberlain never scored 100 points. So I mean, we're living in a time where it's very easy to rewrite and erase history and to replace it with something else.
They didn't say that, did they?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, they said that.
In other words, they are better than him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's not a fair analysis.
Again, I'm just using that as it's one of my most recent irritating examples, but that is the point, that people can say almost anything now and erase and have that erase a history that other people have never been introduced to. So it's very easy to be born and raised in Baltimore and not know or be introduced to these histories of the legislation and the processes, et cetera, and so forth. It's very easy for that to happen. And the extent that we're not involved, again, I would encourage people to be supporting Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle and all of these efforts where the community is being invited to join and become part of a mechanism of be part of producing the mechanism that informs their lives, as opposed to just responding to it.
I know you gotta go. It's 9:59.
Yeah, I do have to go. I'm very sorry about that, but I'm happy to come back anytime. This time happens to work well for me. So anytime you want to do this again, let me know. And thank you very much. And I appreciate it. And peace to you and your audience. It's been great.
Yes. Good morning, world.
Right on.